The spaceship landed with a soft hum, but Valari's heart was beating loudly in her chest. As the doors opened, a warm wave of Earth's air touched her face. She took a deep breath, trying to hide her fear. She was not a soldier, not a warrior. She was a diplomat, trained in peace, trained in words, but nothing had prepared her for meeting a human. Not just any human, Captain Jace Monroe, the man she had read stories about. Stories that called him wild, dangerous, and even savage. She stepped out slowly, her thin silver robe brushing the metal floor. Around her, Earth soldiers stood tall. Watching her every move, Valari felt small under their stares, but she kept walking. Her long blue fingers curled into her palm as she clutched her translator pendant. She repeated the sentence she had practiced over and over, "I come in peace." The moment she said it, a human stepped forward. He was taller than she imagined, his dark hair messy, his face calm but unreadable. His eyes met hers, and something strange passed between them. Not anger, not fear, something warm. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Valari," he said, his voice deep and smooth. She froze for a second, surprised by his polite tone. Was this the savage she had feared? Thank you," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. He reached out a hand toward her. She stared at it, confused. Was this a challenge? A trick? In her world, touching was rare, only done between trusted companions. Still, she slowly reached out and touched his hand. The moment their skin met, a jolt shot through her. Not pain but something electric, she gasped, pulling back. Quickly, Jace tilted his head, a little amused. "Did I hurt you?" She shook her head, looking away. "No. Just surprised." He smiled, a real smile, not the fake one she had seen in reports. "Come, we have a lot to discuss." She followed him into the building, her steps quiet, her eyes alert. Earth technology was so different from her world's. Louder, stronger, more emotional. As they walked through the hall, soldiers nodded to Jace with respect. Valari noticed how they listened to him, how they trusted him. He gave short, kind replies, and once helped a young cadet who had dropped his tablet. This was not the behavior of a monster. Inside the conference room, the lights dimmed slightly. Valari sat on one side of the table, Jace on the other. Her hands rested in her lap, but she couldn't stop glancing at him. He caught her eyes once, and she looked away fast. Was he laughing at her? Or just curious? She didn't know, and that made her nervous. They spoke about peace terms, about cooperation, about culture. Valari tried to sound calm, to act like a professional, but every time Jace leaned closer or smiled at her words, her voice became softer. What was happening to her? After the meeting, he walked her to her assigned room. "You handled that well," he said. "For your first time on Earth." She gave a small nod, her hands trembling again. "You are different than expected," she whispered. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" He asked, raising one eyebrow. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. He laughed, not in a cruel way, but in a light, warm way. "I'll try not to disappoint you." When the door closed behind her, she leaned against it and let out a long breath. She thought she'd feel relief. But instead, her heart was still racing. Images of his face, his hands. His voice played again and again in her mind. She shook her head, trying to push them away. "This is wrong," she whispered. "He's a human." But the warmth in her chest said otherwise. That night, as she lay on her bed, looking up at the ceiling lights, she couldn't sleep. Her translator pendant rested beside her, glowing softly. She touched it, thinking of his words, his smile. Was this fear? Or was it something else? Valari had come to Earth expecting danger, but she had not expected this strange pull, and the more she tried to ignore it, the stronger it became. Valari watched the human from across the room, hidden behind a tall display of glowing Earth crystals. She wasn't spying, at least that's what she told herself. She was observing him for diplomatic reasons, for safety, for knowledge, but in truth, She didn't understand why her eyes kept looking for him every chance they got, Captain Jace. Monroe stood at the center of a small group of humans. Speaking casually, laughing softly, his body moved with ease. His voice smooth like water. To her, he was unpredictable. Dangerous, maybe even reckless, yet somehow, he didn't make her nervous anymore. He made her curious. She wrote a note on her wrist tablet in her native language. Subject: human male appears friendly, but carries unknown emotional weight. Then she erased it, because it felt dishonest. She had seen how he helped the injured cadet this morning. He didn't just act nice, he was kind, as if sensing her gaze. Jace turned his head and met her eyes through the crystal reflections. She quickly looked away, heart skipping. When she looked back, he was already walking toward her. She wanted to vanish, fade into the floor. But she stood frozen like a startled creature. You like these rocks? He asked, standing beside her. They glow when touched. She replied softly. He touched one, and it lit up in pale blue. Valari reached out and placed her own hand beside his. The crystal turned violet, a mix of both their energies. They both stared at it for a moment without speaking. You don't have to be scared of me, he said suddenly. I'm not, she lied, but her voice shook again. He stepped closer, gently lowering his voice. Are you scared of all humans or just me? She looked up, surprised by the question. I thought you were dangerous, she whispered. He nodded. Some of us are. Then he leaned in slightly, not threatening, just sincere. But most of us just want to be understood. That night, Valari replayed that sentence in her head over and over. Most of us just want to be understood. Why did that make her chest feel tight? The next day, she was called to assist in preparing joint presentations between the two species. Much to her confusion, she was paired with Captain Monroe again. They met in a small shared office. Both pretending to be professional, he sat across from her, arms crossed, watching her struggle with her translation device. Need help? He asked. No, she said too quickly. Then after a pause, yes. He stood behind her, looking over her shoulder, pointing at the screen. His breath brushed her neck, and she tensed. But it wasn't fear, it was something warmer, something unknown. You're learning fast, he said, his voice near her ear. She nodded, afraid to speak. They worked in silence for a while, until she finally asked, why do humans smile so much? Jace blinked, then gave a small chuckle. Smiles mean many things, he said. Joy, kindness, sometimes sarcasm. But I don't understand them, she replied honestly. He smiled right then. And she flinched a little, like that, she said, pointing. What does that one mean? This one? He grinned wider. It means I think you're funny, Valari blushed, looking down. That wasn't my goal. Still happened, he said gently. She studied him more after that, his body language, the way he softened his voice when speaking to the young, the way his hand hovered near his weapon only when someone shouted. There was calculation in his every move, but no cruelty. She couldn't find the monster people warned her about. Later, during an off-duty hour, she sat outside the base under a fake earth tree, gazing at the stars above. She heard footsteps. And without turning, she already knew it was him. May I sit? He asked. She nodded, moving over slightly. For a long time, they said nothing, just sat side by side in silence. The wind was soft, and the lights of the base flickered behind them. Do you still think I'm savage? He asked suddenly. Valari looked at him, studying his face in the dim light. No, she said simply. He turned toward her, searching her eyes. And now? I don't know what you are, she admitted. But you are not what I feared. Something passed between them again, a quiet understanding, a connection unspoken but present like gravity. She looked away, her fingers brushing her chest as if to calm the strange fluttering inside. As he stood to leave, she asked, why do you keep spending time with me? He smiled one more time. Because you don't run away anymore. She sat alone long after he left, still unsure if what she felt was danger or something far more powerful. The moment the blade flew through the air, Valari didn't scream. She just stared, frozen. As the weapon aimed for Captain Monroe's heart, time seemed to slow, her mind unable to react, but he moved. Faster than anything she had ever seen. He didn't run. He didn't dodge. He stepped in front of her, shielding her body with his own. The metal blade struck him in the side, cutting deep. He fell to one knee, grabbing his ribs. Blood already soaking through his dark uniform. The guards rushed in, alarms blared, and the attacker was caught in seconds, but Valari could only hear. Her own breath shaky, wild, confused. Why would a human risk their life for her? Why would he protect her, an alien diplomat he barely knew? She ran to his side, kneeling beside him as he winced in pain. "Stay with me," she whispered. Placing her hand gently on his shoulder, his face was pale, lips tight, but he managed a small smirk. "Still savage?" he asked weakly. Tears filled her eyes, and she shook her head. "No," she said, voice cracking. "You're something else entirely." He passed out before he could respond. Later, in the medical room, she waited by his side, refusing to leave. Doctors came and went, saying he would survive, but needed rest. They looked at her strangely, some with confusion, some with suspicion, but no one asked her to go. She sat quietly, watching his chest rise and fall. She had never felt this before. This fear of losing someone, and worse, the guilt. If she hadn't stood there like a frozen statue, if she had warned him faster, if she hadn't needed protecting at all, he wouldn't be hurt. She reached for his hand, holding it gently. It was warm. "Strong even in sleep. Why did you do that?" She whispered. "Why do you care?" When he finally opened his eyes hours later, the first thing he saw was her. She blinked, startled, then leaned in close. "You're awake," she said softly, almost afraid it was a dream. "Yeah," he whispered. "And you're still here." She nodded, not sure what else to say. He tried to sit up, but winced. "No," she said quickly, placing a hand on his chest to stop him. He looked at her hand, then at her. "You're touching me again." He teased. She pulled her hand back, cheeks turning a soft lavender shade, her species version of a blush. "I didn't mean." "It's okay," he said. "I liked it." She stared at him, breath caught in her throat. "You saved me," she said. "That wasn't necessary." "I didn't think," he replied. "I just moved. You could have died." "I didn't," he smiled. "Lucky me." Valari looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "You shouldn't care about me," she said. "It's dangerous." "So is breathing," he replied. "But I still do it." There was silence after that, but not an empty one. It was heavy with meaning, with words they didn't yet know how to say. The next morning, she came back with food, her planet's healing soup, rich and strange smelling. He accepted it, took a bite, made a face, and said, "Tastes like mud and spice." "It's good for your body," she said firmly. "Will it fix my broken ribs?" "Maybe," she smirked. "Then I'll eat more," he sighed. He noticed how she sat closer than before, how her eyes lingered. There was no fear now. No walls, only tension, soft, sweet, and confusing. "I was scared of you," she admitted quietly. "When I first arrived, I know," he replied. "But now, I don't know what I feel." He leaned forward, looking into her eyes. "Me neither," he said gently. "But I know it feels real." That evening, someone knocked on her door. It was a high-ranking alien officer. He stepped inside without waiting for her permission. "You've been spending too much time with the human," he said coldly. "He saved my life," Valari replied calmly. "He's dangerous," the officer said. "He's changing you." Valari stood tall, her voice steady. "I'm still myself," she said. "But maybe I see more clearly now." The officer gave her a warning. "Diplomats don't form attachments," he said. "End this now, or you'll be removed from the mission." When he left, she closed the door slowly, her hand trembling. Not with fear, but with anger and confusion and something else. Something deep inside that whispered she didn't want to end it. Not now, not after everything. That night, As she sat alone with her thoughts, she realized something dangerous. She wasn't just protecting peace between two worlds anymore. She was protecting something far more fragile, her own heart. Valari stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection like it was a stranger. Her robes were perfect, her posture was straight, her breathing calm. But none of it felt real. Not after what she had felt when he touched her hand again. Not after what the officer told her. She was supposed to be a voice of peace. But inside, there was a storm. She pressed 2 fingers to her chest, right where her heart was beating too fast. It had started ever since Jace saved her. And no matter how much she tried to stay neutral, professional, logical, her heart no longer listened. When she entered the conference room, she avoided Jace's eyes. She sat farther than usual, kept her hands folded. Lips sealed, but he noticed. He always noticed after the meeting. He followed her into the hallway. "You're acting like I did something wrong," he said gently. She kept walking, not stopping. "I'm acting the way I should have from the beginning." "That's not you talking," he replied. "That's fear." She turned sharply, eyes shining. "Yes. I'm afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of what happens if I let this, whatever it is, grow." He took a step closer, but she backed away. "If my people find out, I'll be sent home," she said. "Or worse, labeled corrupted." He didn't try to convince her with words. He just looked at her the way he always did, soft, calm, sure. And that, more than anything, made her want to run. Because she wanted to stay. That night, she sat outside her room, legs crossed, eyes up toward the stars. She had grown up believing emotions made you weak, that love was for poets and rebels, not for diplomats. And now here she was, thinking of a human smile like it was some kind of song. The door behind her slid open, and Jace stepped out, carrying a small wrapped item. He placed it beside her silently. "What is it?" she asked without looking at him. "Chocolate bar," he replied. Sitting next to her, "Earth food. I don't eat sweets," she said. "You haven't tried this sweet," he smiled. She picked it up slowly, peeled it back, took a small bite. Her eyes widened slightly. "This is good. Told you," he grinned. They sat together in silence again, this time softer, lighter. She finished the bar and looked at him. "Do you always give food to women who avoid you?" "Only the ones who sit outside their doors pretending they're not crying." She blinked, looking away. "I wasn't crying," he didn't reply. But his silence said he didn't believe her. She sighed, wrapping her arms around her knees. "Maybe I am weak," she said quietly. "No," he answered firmly. "You're brave because you feel, and still stand tall." His words struck something deep inside her. Tears touched her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. "I wish I could stop this," she whispered. He looked at her carefully. "Stop what?" "This feeling," she said. "This strange pull toward you." He reached out and gently touched her hand. "You think I don't feel it too?" She met his eyes, saw the truth in them. There was no game, no trick, just truth. And it terrified her. The next morning, she walked into the central hall and saw a message blinking on her data pad. "You are under observation. Human contact must be reduced immediately." No name, no signature, but the meaning was clear. They knew. She felt the walls closing in. Every step through the hall, every look from another diplomat, it all felt heavier, colder. They wanted her to choose duty or desire, safety or sincerity. She entered the quiet meditation chamber and sat alone, breathing slow, but her thoughts were full of his voice, his eyes, his wounds, his laughter, and the way her heart beat faster when he simply stood near her. She couldn't go on like this, hiding behind rules, choking her feelings. But if she stepped forward, she could lose everything, her position, her title, her people's respect. But when she imagined life without Jace, that future looked even emptier. Late that night, she stood outside his quarters, unsure why she had come. Her hand hovered over the door control for a long time. Then slowly, she pressed it. The door opened, and there he stood, surprised but calm. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She didn't answer. She just stepped in slowly, and for once she didn't run. They came for her before the sun rose, 3 silent officers in black cloaks, faces hidden, footsteps heavy. She had just stepped out of Jace's room, still carrying the warmth of his presence in her chest. The door hadn't even closed behind her when one of them grabbed her arm. She didn't fight, didn't scream. She just looked back once, saw Jace's shocked face, before they dragged her down the hallway. No words were spoken, not until they threw her into a cold white room. The door sealed behind her with a hiss. She stood in silence, her breath fogging in the chilled air. A soft light came from the ceiling, washing her pale skin in silver, and then the voice came. "You have forgotten your purpose." It echoed from the walls. Not belonging to any single face, Valari stood, tall, fists clenched. "I have done my duty," she said. "You have compromised yourself." The voice replied, cold and flat. "The human's influence is clear. Your thoughts are no longer pure." She felt her chest tighten. "Feelings are not weakness," she said quietly. "They are distractions." The voice snapped. "You were chosen to represent our kind, not fall into some human's arms." She stepped forward, voice steady. "He saved my life. He infected your mind." They told her she would be reassigned, sent back to the diplomatic homeworld. This mission, this connection, it was over. She was no longer trusted. When they left her alone, she sat in the corner of the room, knees to her chest. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not yet. She wasn't ready to break. Not until she saw him one more time. Hours passed before they allowed her a visitor. She didn't expect it to be Jace. But when the door opened, and she saw him standing there, she couldn't stop herself. She ran to him and wrapped her arms around him tightly. He didn't say a word at first, just held her like she was about to vanish. "I thought they'd taken you somewhere worse," he whispered. "They tried," she said, burying her face in his chest. "I'm being sent home." He pulled back slowly, looking into her eyes. "Can't we stop them?" "They've already made the decision," she replied. "Unless I break the rules and become an exile." Jace's jaw tightened. "Then let's do it." She blinked, stunned. "Do what?" "Run," he said. "I don't care about rules or missions. I care about you." Her heart leapt, but her mind spun in panic. "It's not that simple." "It never is," he said. "But what we feel, it's real, isn't it?" She nodded slowly, voice trembling. "Yes." They began planning that same night, carefully, secretly. They couldn't use official exits or transports. Everything had to be quiet, invisible, like they were ghosts walking through walls. Valari had one ally left, a technician from her homeworld who owed her a favor. He created a security blind spot in the docking area, just big enough for one short window. They would escape through there into the neutral zone. If they were caught, she would be labeled a traitor and Jace a threat. But neither of them hesitated. On the night of the escape, she wore simple clothes, her diplomatic robes left behind. Jace waited in the shadow of the cargo bay, eyes scanning the surroundings. When she arrived, he grabbed her hand and didn't let go. "I was scared you wouldn't come," he whispered. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "But then I remembered your eyes. They moved fast, heartbeats loud in their ears, past the blinking lights, past the metal walls, past everything that had once defined them. When the final door opened, and the night air of the neutral zone hit their faces, they paused, holding hands tightly. But before they could step forward, a voice called out, "Stop where you are." They turned slowly. A single alien officer stood behind them. Weapon raised, Valari stepped in front of Jace. "Please," she said, "let us go." The officer's finger twitched on the trigger. But then, after a long breath, he lowered the weapon. "I didn't see anything," he said, turning away. And just like that, they ran through shadows, through silence, through fear, until the stars above them no longer belonged to any government. until they were just two souls on the edge of something new. Later, as they rested under a metal bridge, far from the base, Jace looked at her and said, "You just gave up everything." She smiled for the first time that day. "No," she whispered, "I chose something." And for the first time, the word exile didn't sound like a punishment. It sounded like freedom. The rain fell hard on the metal roof above them, cold and sharp like falling needles. Valari sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, her wet hair sticking to her cheeks. Jace crouched beside her, starting a small fire with old earth tech he'd scavenged from a junk pile. Each spark felt like a small victory in this strange new life. Exiles now, but free, hunted, but together. They had been running for 3 days, hiding between abandoned cargo ports, dodging patrol drones every time a light passed overhead. Valari froze, afraid they'd be caught, not because she feared punishment, but because she feared losing him. Jace placed a warm pack into her hands and looked into her tired eyes. "We'll find shelter soon," he promised. She nodded weakly, but said nothing. The wind howled outside. The fire flickered. For a moment, they could pretend they were the only two souls in the galaxy. Suddenly, a beeping sound echoed nearby, low and fast. Jace grabbed his scanner and cursed under his breath. "Motion sensors," he said. "Someone's tracking us." Valari stood quickly, her fear returning like a flood. "Is it my people?" "Worse," he said. "Bounty hunters." They packed in seconds and slipped out through a drainage shaft, crawling through mud and wires. Valari's hands trembled as she followed him into the dark. They emerged near a forgotten rail station, where broken hovercars lay covered in moss and dust. Jace helped her inside one, sealed the doors, and waited in silence. From the distance came voices not speaking, but growling, clicking. "They're not here for a paycheck," Jace whispered. "They're here for sport." Valari pressed her back to the cold metal, breath shallow. This was what her people meant when they called humans violent. But tonight, it wasn't Jace who terrified her. It was the rest of the galaxy. The attackers passed, never seeing them. Only after the danger faded did Jace speak again. "You okay?" She nodded, then suddenly laughed soft, surprised. "I'm covered in mud, hiding in a dead machine, hunted by killers," she said. "And I've never felt more alive." He looked at her in the dim glow, a small smile touching his lips. "You're not what I expected either," he said. "Diplomats don't usually laugh while being hunted." "Maybe I'm not a diplomat anymore," she replied. The next day, they reached a trade zone that wasn't loyal to any species. It was dangerous, messy, full of thieves and secrets, but it was safe from both their governments. They found a room above an old food stall, its walls thin, its lights flickering. Jace dropped onto the bed, exhausted. Valari stood by the window, staring at a neon sign blinking in alien script. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time she didn't feel lost. She felt chosen. Later that night, she sat beside him, both of them wrapped in silence. Her fingers brushed his arm gently, and he turned toward her. "What happens next?" she asked. "We keep moving," he said. "We build something new, together." He reached out and took her hand. Always, there was no need for more words. Not when their closeness said everything. But peace didn't last long. The following morning, a message flashed across a stolen comm device. Valari's eyes widened as she read the coded lines. "They're blaming you," she whispered. "They're calling you a kidnapper," Jace frowned, reading over her shoulder. "They want me dead." Valari's hands shook. "This isn't just about us anymore," she said. "They'll hunt you across systems." "Then let them try," he said firmly. "I won't leave you." "I don't want you to die for me," she whispered. "I'd rather die free beside you than live empty without you." That night, she cried into his chest, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing someone would choose her over everything. He held her without saying a word, letting her tears soak into his shirt, and when her sobs faded into quiet breathing, he kissed her forehead softly, a promise without sound. They were outlaws now, but under that broken ceiling, they felt more like soulmates than fugitives, and in the darkest corner of the galaxy, they had found their own kind of light. The warships arrived without warning, black shadows blotting out the stars above the trade zone. Valari saw them first, her body freezing as she stared out the broken window. Their sleek hulls bore the crest of her people, proud and sharp, but to her now, that symbol looked more like a chain. Jace was already checking his gear. Eyes narrowed. "This isn't a search party," he said quietly. "It's a warning. They're here to make an example," she whispered, "to show the galaxy what happens to traitors." People in the zone scattered like insects. Doors slammed, lights cut out, sirens wailed in the distance. Valari turned to Jace, her heart racing faster than ever. "We have to run." "No," he said. "We've been running too long." They didn't have a plan, just desperation. Their only option was to reach the Unity Summit, a neutral ground where leaders from dozens of species would gather. If she could speak there, if she could tell the truth, maybe, just maybe, they'd listen. She had been trained her whole life to speak for peace. Now she would use that gift not for her people, but for their future. They stole a delivery craft and flew through underground tunnels, avoiding sensors, weaving through fire and steel. Jace flew with steady hands, but Valari could feel the tension in every breath he took. He wasn't scared for himself, he was scared for her. And that made her chest ache in ways she still didn't fully understand. They reached the Unity Station just as it opened its gates for the summit. Security officers tried to stop them, but Valari stood tall, showing her diplomat seal, the same one they had ordered her to discard. "I demand the right to speak," she said, voice clear. The guards hesitated, confused, but protocol was protocol. She was allowed inside, under watch with Jace beside her. The great hall was bright and cold, filled with leaders in shimmering robes and shining armor. Her people sat at the highest tier, faces hard, unmoved. She walked slowly toward the center podium, her legs shaking. She wasn't supposed to be here, and yet, she had never felt more certain of anything in her life. Jace stood at the edge of the platform, eyes locked on her. He gave a slight nod, silent but strong. It gave her the courage to breathe. She began to speak, her voice soft but rising with each word. She told them everything, how peace was meaningless without truth, how love could exist between enemies, how hearts could change faster than politics. She spoke of Jace not as a human, not as a soldier, but as someone who had shown her what it meant to be free. Whispers spread through the crowd, some shocked, some intrigued. Her people looked furious, but she didn't stop. She raised her voice one last time. "If I am to be punished for this love, then let the galaxy see what kind of peace you offer." The room fell silent. Then someone stood, an elder from a distant species with crystal skin and glowing eyes. "She speaks not of rebellion," the elder said. "She speaks of evolution." Another voice joined, then another. A ripple of support grew. Her people tried to speak against her, but it was too late. Her words had already broken the wall, not with violence, but with truth. Later, outside the hall, Jace met her with wide eyes. "You did it," he whispered. "No," she said, smiling. "We did." The council didn't exile her, they offered her a choice: return as a diplomat or walk away. She chose neither. She walked forward into a new role, an unofficial voice for those who loved beyond borders, for those who found peace not in treaties, but in understanding. Jace took her hand, and this time, she didn't look around to see who was watching. They walked into the crowd like they belonged, not just to each other, but to something bigger. Some still called her a traitor, some still called him a savage, but together, they were proof that even in the coldest stars, warmth could bloom. And somewhere between war and silence, between duty and feeling, they found what no agreement had ever created: a love that no species could define.